Welcome to the fourth episode of Run That Back, and for the first time on this series, we're talking about defense today. And what better way to start than with Brian Flores' defense in Minnesota, which had been struggling up to this point in the year relative to expectations, but they get back on track in a big way this past Sunday against the Detroit Lions offense that had been carving up the league thus far in the 2025 season. So, without wasting any more of your time, let's get into it. All right, the Vikings defense gets back on track against a Lions offense that had been rolling coming into this game. And let's just get right into the game plan that helped them get there. So, in typical Brian Flores fashion, we have six guys on the defensive front in a base defense look here. So Jalen Redmond, Javon Hargrave, and Jonathan Allen are your three down linemen. You have your edge rushers, and then you also have Eric Wilson over here walked up onto the ball as the sixth man to complete the six-man front. Now, that's going to happen a lot this game. You're going to see a lot of six-man fronts from the Vikings, and it's just interesting to see the different ways that they manipulated Detroit's pass protection rules as this game goes on. But let's just start with the Lions' pass protection on this play. So on the left side of this line, you're going to get a chip from Sam Laporta on Eric Wilson here, and he's going to release. And you're going to have Taylor Decker setting back to get him after the chip. 73 Mahogany is going to slide out to Grenard, and then Glasgow is going to end up blocking Hat on a Hat, Jonathan Allen, and then you have again these two, Sewell and Ratledge, one-on-one backside or front side, I guess, depending on how you look at it, and then Brock Wright is going to be one-on-one with Andrew Van Ginkel on the edge. Now, Jahmyr Gibbs is the seventh man in this pass protection. And this pass protection plan, and Gibbs is going to take a play action fake, and his first responsibility is any blitzers. So if Blake Cashman decides to blitz after the ball is snapped, Jahmyr Gibbs is going to be one-on-one with him. And then if not, he's going to scan, so he's going to look across the line of scrimmage and basically help anybody that needs it. And on this particular play, he is going to the right. However, that becomes a problem as this play goes on, so let's just roll it a while. You have your play action fake and everybody is blocked up Hat on a Hat. You have your chip over here from Laporta, and Taylor Decker is patiently waiting to take over this blocking responsibility. But also up here at the top, you have Brock Wright one-on-one with Andrew Van Ginkel, and Andrew Van Ginkel is turning the edge here. And it's at this point when Jahmyr Gibbs' eyes come over this way, because there was no blitzer for him to step up and block. So now his eyes have scanned to the right here, and he sees Andrew Van Ginkel winning around this edge. But unfortunately, he's just a little bit late to get there, and also sees more immediate pressure from Jonathan Allen coming up the middle, even though Glasgow is in a pretty good position to, wall him off and keep this pocket clean for Goff. And because Wright doesn't get any help from Jahmyr Gibbs, Andrew Van Ginkel is able to force Goff to step up, and it forces an inaccurate ball here that gets the incompletion. Next play here, this is a tough one for the Vikings defense. I'll just start by explaining what the look is here. By all accounts, this looks like a man coverage blitz, a single high safety, two pressed up corners, six guys on the line of scrimmage, either a man coverage blitz or disguised man coverage blitz with a single high safety. Of course, as Brian Flores loves to do, they're going to run Tampa 2 out of this. So this safety is going to come over and take his half. Harrison Smith is going to sprint back to his half of the field. And then you're going to have your two cloud corners. Cashman, who is mugged up, is going to fall off into the hook to curl. And then you'll have another hook to curl defender. And Josh Metellus here is going to be the pole runner in Tampa 2. Now, the pole runner is typically your Mike linebacker who is going to be lined up over the ball. And the fact that it's not actually becomes problematic for the Vikings on this play. So the Lions here have trips to the field side, and so defenses would designate this 1, 2, 3 in terms of the receivers. But because Laporta and Amon-Ra St. Brown here are basically in a stack, it ends up just being whoever breaks in first and whoever breaks out first. So Amon-Ra St. Brown actually runs like a little wheel behind him, and Sam Laporta is going to run up the seam. So this ends up playing out as Sam Laporta being the third receiver and Amon-Ra St. Brown being the second receiver. Right? Okay. So that pole runner that I just talked about, which is Josh Metellus on this play, who is usually a Mike linebacker in the middle of the field, they are responsible for taking the third route if it goes vertical. And like I said, Sam Laporta on this play is going to run a little seam route, so he's going to be that third vertical route. The reason why I highlighted the middle of the field here is because that's where that Mike linebacker usually is that's running the pole, and he usually is turning towards the passing strength so that he can get eyes on that vertical route attached to him at a certain depth and run stride for stride with him down the seam and completely take that away. Because Josh Metellus is aligned over top of him and his landmark is the middle of the field, he turns away from the passing strength and he loses sight of Sam Laporta here. So I'll kind of let this run here for a second. You'll see what I mean. And ball is snapped. And Josh Metellus, who is, like I said, the seam linebacker on this play, his eyes are away from the passing strength. And Sam Laporta is able to get behind him. And you get a very nice throw from Goff here, a very nice layered ball. But Josh Metellus did not get enough depth because he had to turn away from the passing strength. And Laporta gets in the end zone here with a little help from one of his teammates. But that's just my way of saying that disguised coverages are not always better. Yes, they can confuse the quarterback. Yes, they can confuse the offense and show them something different than what they've seen pre-snap. But it can also make the jobs of your defensive players a little bit harder when they don't necessarily need to be. But getting back into the positives here for the Viking defense, on that first play you saw the Vikings win around the edge with Andrew Van Ginkel and a 6-man front. And now you're going to see them with a 5-man front, but a very, very wide 5-man front. So there's 2 tight ends on this side of the ball, and Jonathan Grenard is still aligned outside of them. You're going to have Eric Wilson walked up with a huge, huge gap between him and the left tackle, Taylor Decker. Even Jalen Redmond is lined up outside the tackle's shoulder, and then you have a shade nose and a 3 technique. But this is a very wide alignment from the Lions' pass rush, because they're trying to widen out the Detroit offensive line. So they're trying to get Sewell to come all the way out here. You're going to get Ratledge with Jonathan Allen and Glasgow one-on-one with, I think that's Levi Drake Rodriguez. And then what they want is they want Decker to fan out to Eric Wilson, and they want Mahogany to fan out to Jalen Redmond. What ends up happening is that neither of these edge rushers are going to rush. So they've made them respect them, but Grenard is peeling off and Eric Wilson is peeling off. And then you're going to get a little crossfire blitz up the middle here with Ivan Pace and Blake Cashman. And the only person who is in to block for this is Jahmyr Gibbs. So you can see how this plays out. Over here, Christian Mahogany is now blocking nobody because Taylor Decker is taking Jalen Redmond, and he sees that Levi Drake Rodriguez is one-on-one with his center. And because the center and guard have both fanned out, there is a huge, huge gap in here for 2 pass rushers, 2 blitzing linebackers to be one-on-one with Jahmyr Gibbs in pass protection. And this went about as well as you could expect. Blake Cashman gets free. Ivan Pace is not far behind. And it just kind of goes to show what the Vikings were trying to do. They're trying to get pressure up the middle because that's how you beat Jared Goff. You get pressure up the middle, and they're using creative ways to get there. They're spreading out the Lions' offensive line and then widening those A gaps to get their linebackers through and hopefully get one-on-one with a running back, because Jahmyr Gibbs' first responsibility throughout this game was the blitzing linebackers. And you'll see this come up time and time again as we go through this. And then this next play, this is the exact same idea. Once again, you have Eric Wilson and Jonathan Grenard very wide alignments, and they are both going to peel off. Neither of these 2 are rushing here. Jalen Redmond is on the outside shoulder of the tackle. I think the tight end motion's over, but he stays where he is. Then you have your shade nose. I think he's more of a 1 on this play. Shade nose and a 3 technique. And on this play, instead of 2 linebackers blitzing, Ivan Pace is going to rotate in. Okay, there it is. Laporta rolled into the blocking scheme. You get 1 blitzer on this play. Ivan Pace is blitzing through this A gap. Now, this is, again, perfect for the blocking scheme the Lions have on in this play, because Sewell is going to end up taking Jalen Redmond here. Laporta is going to help because he's responsible for Eric Wilson, but Eric Wilson falls off. Tate Ratledge is also going to go to the front side of this play. So is Graham Glasgow. And then you have Christian Mahogany blocking Jonathan Allen on the backside. And another thing the Vikings did very well in this game was widen their pass rush paths in order to create these gaps. So you have, again, I think this is Levi Drake Rodriguez, and you have Jonathan Allen attacking the outside shoulder of their man in order to create wider A gaps. Also on this play, you're going to get Penei Sewell fanning out to Jonathan Grenard, who doesn't end up rushing. And so once again, because the offensive line is occupied with, guys who aren't actually rushing the passer, you get Ivan Pace one-on-one up the middle with Jahmyr Gibbs. And look, Jahmyr Gibbs is a fantastic player, but Jahmyr Gibbs is not going to be able to stop one of the best blitzing linebackers in the league when he's coming downhill full speed in an A gap that you could drive a small car through. That's just not going to happen. And as you see on this play, he gets steamrolled by Ivan Pace, forces Goff off his spot, and makes him throw an inaccurate pass. And then on the very next play, the Vikings do it again. They have these wide edge rushers, Van Ginkel and Grenard, and they both drop off into coverage. And the Lions, once again, fan out to block them, and there's nobody home. Now, you might be asking, if the Vikings just keep doing this, why are the Lions still fanning out to block these guys, even if they know they're not rushing? Because they don't. They have to respect these guys as pass rushers because they're showing pass rush demeanor. If they just ignore them, especially on what I believe was a 3rd and long like this one, these guys have a free access to the quarterback if they just ignore them. You can't just ignore them. You have to respect them. And because you have to respect these two edge rushers, you also have to have your guards fan out to take these interior defensive linemen and leave Gibbs and Glasgow to handle whatever comes over the middle of the over the ball, essentially. And the Vikings know that they have to respect this, and they just keep exploiting these rules over and over again because, again, Graham Glasgow is a fine player and Jahmyr Gibbs is a very good player, but in pass protection, these two are the weak spots of this Detroit offensive line. And if you get guys coming downhill into space at full speed against these two, that's your best matchup. And that's what the Vikings did this whole game, is they just exploited that matchup over and over again. And so when I roll the tape here, you're going to see Grenard and Van Ginkel both peel off. You see Eric Wilson and Blake Cashman both get one-on-ones against Gibbs and Glasgow, and they get to Jared Goff here on 3rd down for the sack. It's not that complicated or anything, but it's just what the Vikings did over and over again to get good matchups up front. But that's not to say that the Lions didn't try to adjust. We're going to get a little bit of a different pass protection plan here from the Lions against a very similar look to what the Vikings had been doing this whole game. So obviously you saw that point from Goff there, and I'll tell you what that was in a second. But you get a 7-man front from the Vikings here. All of these guys have rush demeanor. However, based on what the Vikings have done throughout this game, you'd expect Grenard or Harrison Smith or Andrew Van Ginkel, you'd expect one of these guys, or two, or even all three of them, to drop off and for them to have some odd blitz coming up the middle with Metellus and Cashman and all of these guys, right? So instead of fanning out like the Lions have been doing all game, they're just going to have Sewell and everyone take the most dangerous guy and leave Metellus as the free rusher up the middle for Gibbs because he's not lined up over the A gap. And that's what that point was from Jared Goff. So Sewell is going to block most dangerous. He's going to have Andrew Van Ginkel. Ratledge is going to take Redmond. Glasgow is going to take Cashman. Mahogany is going to take, I believe this is Jonathan Allen or Javon Hargrave. And then just in case Grenard rushes, they still have Taylor Decker fanning out to him. And they are going to have Gibbs come across and take Metellus. And Harrison Smith, they don't really buy that Harrison Smith is rushing here. Otherwise, odds are good that they would have had Jahmyr Gibbs release out into the flat as a hot answer for this blitz. They've seen this guy peel off so many times this game. They're thinking Harrison Smith is going to do the same, and they're a little bit more worried about Josh Metellus blitzing up the middle, and that's why Gibbs is prioritizing him. However, they throw him a curveball here. Josh Metellus drops off, and Harrison Smith blitzes around the edge, and so with no hot answer and a free rusher, Goff ends up dirting this thing, trying to throw it over the middle to Sam Laporta. So the Lions did try to adjust. They just happened to do so at the exact time that the Vikings were throwing them a curveball up front. And I may have mentioned earlier how the Vikings got the Lions into advantageous down and distances in this game, and they did so by stopping the run decently well. I don't have the stats on hand, but it felt like this game the Lions weren't able to kind of assert their will in the run game and get themselves into third and shorts and second and shorts and stuff like that as the game was going on. And one of the reasons is because the guys that the Vikings paid up front this offseason, Jonathan Allen and Javon Hargrave, finally showed up in a big way in this game, especially Hargrave. I think this was Hargrave's best game of the year, like pretty easily. He made a couple plays in the run game, and this is going to be one of them that, really helped them win this game. And I'll just get into this. The Lions are a zone-heavy run team, and this is going to be no different. Sam Laporta is going to motion across here and be kind of a lead blocker, and then they're going to run a zone play, just a little wide zone behind him or inside zone behind him. And in order to do that, you're going to have Dan Skipper coming out here into space and trying to get to the outside shoulder of Grenard. Mahogany is going to get to the front shoulder of Jonathan Allen, or he's going to try to. And then Tate Ratledge is going to try to get to the front shoulder of Javon Hargrave with a little bit of help from Glasgow. And Glasgow is going to get to the second level. Now, he's not going to get a ton of help from Glasgow, Ratledge that is, because Ratledge is essentially head up with Javon Hargrave. And that is kind of a dream if you're trying to get to somebody's front shoulder in a zone play. Of course, you have your guys doing their thing backside, and then Jahmyr Gibbs hitting this run to the front side. But what happens is Tate Ratledge is never really able to get to the front shoulder of Javon Hargrave, despite having, a pretty good alignment to do so. And because he's not able to do that, Javon Hargrave stays on the front shoulder of him and just walks him down the line right here. You also should note that Jonathan Allen right here is staying on the outside shoulder of his man and forcing Jahmyr Gibbs to look for cutbacks, because Eric Wilson is going to fall off here into I guess this is the A gap because it's a little bit of a wider zone play. And Jahmyr Gibbs, like I said, is going to be looking for a cutback here, but because Javon Hargrave got to the front shoulder of Ratledge and pretty much stood him straight up and was able to actually walk him back a few yards, Ratledge is pretty much in Gibbs' lap right now, and Gibbs really has nowhere to go. And even though I don't know if Hargrave got credited with a tackle here, Hargrave is the one who blows this run up because he didn't let himself get reached by Tate Ratledge. All right, and next play, and stop me if you've heard me say it already, but the Vikings have a 7-man front, and the edge rushers are not rushing. Van Ginkel and Grenard are both going to peel off. Now that the Vikings have showed that they are willing to rush these guys, and they rushed Harrison Smith, who ended up blowing up a third down play earlier in the game, the Lions once again have to respect it by fanning the tackles out, fanning the guards out, and then Cashman and Eric Wilson have some room to blitz up the middle. This one is not any type of crossfire blitz or anything. They're just blitzing both A gaps like you do in Madden. And Glasgow is going to take Cashman. And then Jahmyr Gibbs is once again going to be one-on-one with Eric Wilson in the A gap. And once again, Jahmyr Gibbs, great player, is no match for a blitzing linebacker in the A gap. He gets blown up. Goff gets sacked. Drive is over. Last play here, and this is a fun one, not necessarily because of the schematics of it, but just because these are players making plays on a crucial point of the game. The Vikings are once again showing that 6-man front, although this time Van Ginkel and Grenard are both rushing the passer, while Eric Wilson and Blake Cashman are going to fall off into coverage. And the Lions' pass protection plan is one that we've seen a bunch of times this game. They have to respect the edge rushers because of what happened with Harrison Smith earlier, but they also have to be careful about the two blitzing linebackers. So what we have here is Penei Sewell, blocking Andrew Van Ginkel. You have right guard on Redmond. Center, Glasgow is going to take Eric Wilson if he blitzes, but he doesn't end up blitzing, so he just ends up helping the left guard, who is one-on-one with, I can't tell if it's Hargrave or Allen, doesn't really matter. And then Decker is one-on-one with Grenard. And then Montgomery, like I said, is checking to see if Eric Wilson is blitzing, or Blake Cashman is blitzing, and then going to go out into the flat on the left side of this Detroit offense. Now, I think that this was a straight pass rush from Redmond and Van Ginkel. It plays out in a very funny way, though, that I don't know if was planned, but if it was planned, it was really cool. Either way, it's really cool. You'll see what I mean. The Lions, we have our pre-snap motion, yada, yada, and here we go. At this point in the pass rush, Andrew Van Ginkel decides to hit Penei Sewell with an inside spin move, right? What ends up happening is as he's doing this, Jared Goff is drifting a little bit, and Jalen Redmond is going to try to meet him outside of the pocket. This times up so perfectly that I almost wonder if Andrew Van Ginkel was spinning to pick the right guard and have Jalen Redmond loop around like a stunt really late in the down. I don't think that's what they were doing, but it plays out so perfectly that I almost wonder if that is what they plan to do here, because the timing is perfect. And Van Ginkel gets in, essentially sets a pick on Ratledge, and Jalen Redmond gets a sack on 3rd down. And then on the very next play, which was 4th down, the Vikings blocked Jake Bates' field goal attempt to keep the lead at 10 and put a huge damper on Detroit's comeback chances. So this is one of the most important plays of the game, and I wonder if it was just, Van Ginkel and Redmond freestyling, or if this was something that Flores actually called. I don't know the answer. I don't know if you guys know the answer. Either way, very cool, very good game from the Vikings defense. And yeah, it's been a blast to watch the film of this game and just kind of see what they've been doing up front. All right, guys, and that's all I got for today's film session. A little bit longer than usual, but I'm sure none of you mind, or I hope none of you mind. If you do mind, then I don't really care. But for those of you who are still here, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.